And welcome into episode 20 of Jacket Sports Weekly. I'll be your host today, Anthony DeFilippo, also joined by my co-host, Brett Gambita. We have a lot to talk about today. We'll start it off with outdoor track and field, talking with our analyst, Mike McKenzie, about the start of the season this upcoming weekend. Then we'll talk about baseball. They've been in action this week and will continue to be leading into PAC play, which begins this Saturday against Allegheny. We'll talk to Dean Shazer about that. And softball, they've been off for 11 days, but they're playing in back-to-back days. We'll talk to our analyst, Seth Adams. You're watching Jacket Sports Weekly. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Jacket Sports Weekly, Waynesburg University's weekly sports show where we cover the best of the best in athletics. Our analysts discuss a multitude of highlight plays such as touchdown passes.
And Barber's going to throw again, one-on-one. Does he got it in him? That's a catch! Tyler Richmond with flags thrown everywhere makes the catch! Touchdown, Waynesburg!
And ones.
This was low, Waynesburg's going to get it! Suggs is going to pull away here, go for the layup, and it's going to fall in and one! PJ Suggs!
And home runs.
Higgins drives one to left field. The left fielder running back, and that ball is out of here. Grace Higgins.
Join us every Wednesday to see what's new in Waynesburg University athletics.
Welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. It's time for our first segment. Anthony DeFilippo still with you, bringing in my co-host Brett Gambita and Michael McKenzie to talk some outdoor track and field. Mike, talk a little bit about this Stan Romanowski Invitational that's coming up this Saturday, and what can expect to see.
So I don't think we're expecting to look at finishes compared to the rest of the field as much as times, where that ranks among each athlete's and competitors' personal bests, where they wanted to be, their goals going in to the Open. This is an Open against D1, D2, and D3 athletes. The competition it's got quantity and quality in it. So I think for Waynesburg, these are a lot of personal marks that I think these athletes are going to try to reach. I wouldn't be surprised to see some top 10 finishes here and there, but I think the main thing these athletes are looking for going into it, and I think the main thing that we should be watching for the Stan Romanowski Open this weekend is personal benchmarks. Where do these athletes finish compared to their personal bests, or where they set their personal goals heading into the Open? Being the first of the outdoor season, the first in nearly a month since the PAC Indoor Championships, trying to get back into the swing of a season of competing in outdoor track and field events.
You mentioned the level of competition. Now, what do you think it's like for Waynesburg to go against D1 and D2 competitors?
It's got to be a good benchmark to see where they're at personally and as a team. You get to go against these top-tier competitors in Division I and Division II. Some of these athletes have full-ride scholarships to go compete in this sport. If you can compete against these guys, finish right in the middle of some of these D1 and D2 athletes, I think it's good for their personal gain and reflection almost. You start the outdoor season off with a lot of these D1 and D2 athletes, with a lot of top-tier athletes at outdoor track and field. To see where you finish against these athletes, that's going to be good moving forward, a good starting point for this season for these Waynesburg athletes.
Now, I know you had an opportunity to talk about it a little bit last week, but given that this is their first event since the indoor season, what is that transition going to look like going outdoors now?
I think it's not so much the transition in terms of the climate from indoor to outdoor. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a difference. Indoor, you control the climate, the AC's on or the heat's on, depending on what you need in the indoor season. Now outside, the weather's a little bit different. Maybe it's a little bit warmer. Maybe it's a little bit cooler. I know it's a little bit cooler today. Hopefully, this is the last day I'm wearing long sleeves. But that's not much of a change, I don't think, unless there's severe wind or it's severe cold, which I don't expect for the Stan Romanowski or for really any Open for these Waynesburg athletes. It's more so getting back into the swing of a full track and field season. The PACs were nearly a month ago for these competitors. Less than a month ago, but it's right around that 3-week mark. So it's more so getting back into the swing of a full season, the first meet of the outdoor season. It's what did you do over that 3.5 week span from the indoor championships to now? Did you take a little bit of time off? Did you ramp up some of your workouts and preparation? What did you do in this 3-4 week span from indoor championships to now the start of the outdoor season? And how do you start off? That's really the difference. It's that 3 week stretch, that off time they had from indoor championships to now the Romanowski.
Now, what individuals do you think we should expect to make an impact? You mentioned that it's more of looking at individuals rather than team scores. So name a few of those people that you think can step up big.
I think for the men, there's two obvious ones to look at. Jacob Parker, he finished first place in the shot put at the indoor championships, a school record throw at the indoors of 15.17 meters. I'm not sure he breaks the outdoor record on the first meet, but I want to see how close he is to getting that on the first meet, because I definitely think at some point in the outdoor season, he's going to break the school outdoor record. It's a question of when, not if, and I said that last week. I want to see how close he is to breaking that outdoor record in the first meet. And then Quentin Weaver, who's broken so many school records, one of the best runners we've seen at Waynesburg, not only in recent memory, but maybe in school history. How many more records is he going to come close to breaking? How close is he to some of these D1 and D2 athletes? Because the way he's performed against not only some of these school records, but against these Division III and sometimes Division II athletes at track and field, I want to see how he compares against Division I now that he's gotten himself the status of one of the best runners at Waynesburg, all these records that he's broken, specifically in the longer distance events.
Now, I will ask a longer-term team question. What are some of the goals, primary goals that you see moving forward throughout the length of the season from this track team?
I think each competitor, compared to where they finished last season, is going to want to finish either 1 or 2 spots ahead. So that varies based on athlete. Quentin Weaver won a number of events. He's going to look to repeat in some events. Jacob Parker, he's going to look to finish first place in the shot put. Again, some of these competitors, Ella Rochelle, she finished 4th in the 400, 5th in the 200 for indoors. She's going to look to finish around that same area, maybe crack the top 3 in both of those events. I think longer term, I think you're going to see more top 3 finishers and maybe more first place finishers than we saw last year in the outdoor season. But I think I'm looking at those 3 athletes in particular. Where's Harker going to finish? Where's Weaver going to finish? Where's Rochelle going to finish? And then maybe where's freshman Maggie Claire going to finish? She was 5th place in the shot put in the indoors at the PAC. I want to see how she does in the outdoor, her first full outdoor spring season in PAC play. I'm interested to see where Maggie Claire finishes at the end of the season. And then where does she start? What's her starting point at the Romanowski this weekend?
So starting with the Romanowski, it will begin a stretch of 6 invitationals in 5 weeks. How can that take a toll on Waynesburg?
I mean, that's going to take a mental and a physical toll. Obviously, in any sport, you get a long stretch where you're playing a lot of games, or I should say a shorter stretch where you're playing a lot of games in other sports like basketball, like baseball. In outdoor track and field, you don't see 6 events in 5 weeks a lot. So it's going to be a lot of these athletes taking care of their bodies in the off time. What are you doing on your off days? Are you recovering enough? Are you spending enough time with the training staff? Are you making sure you're listening to your body enough to make sure you're in shape to go for the next event? Does that mean maybe missing an event? In some cases it could. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the top tier competitors, or just competitors in general for Waynesburg that we normally see in events like the shot put, like the javelin throw, like the 400, 800, you name it. Some of them are going to miss at some point because you have 6 events, invitationals, whatever, in 5 weeks. That's going to take a toll on your body, especially for these runners. I think they have to be able to listen to their bodies, recover. It's going to be all about recovery in those off days, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a handful of athletes and competitors that are going to have to recuse themselves or miss 1 or 2 invitationals to make sure that they're ready to go for outdoor championships at the end of the season. It's the home stretch of the season is what we're working towards here. PAC championships. That's the ultimate goal. I don't think it would be worth it to risk it for an extra invitational or 2 early in the season if you're not 100%.
You've talked a lot about individual players, Mike. Are there any players lower down the list that maybe didn't perform as well last season that you're maybe looking to take a jump off the top of your head?
I'm looking at Jaleesa Fuller as a name that's not really being talked a lot about. She finished top 10 in program history at the indoor PACs in the 400. That was 6th place overall with a 1 minute, 3.21 second time. I want to see how she does transitioning to the outdoor. It wasn't a name that was mentioned a lot in the indoor track and field season. I'm interested to see how she starts at the Romanowski coming off of her best finish at an event. I'm going to be interested to see how Fuller does to start off the outdoor season, and then as we progress through the outdoor season, Jaleesa Fuller, that's the name I'm watching out for Waynesburg.
Well, Mike, thank you for taking the time with us to talk about some outdoor track and field. When we return here on JSW, Dean Shazer will be sitting down with us to talk about baseball. And welcome back into Jacket Sports Weekly. We're going to talk about baseball now, and to do that, we have Dean Shazer. So, Dean, thank you for joining us here today.
Yes, of course. Welcome in. I guess we got a few games to talk about. Live game right now, Pitt Greensburg. So let's get into it.
So, Game 1, a 23-8 win for the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets over UPG. Any main takeaways?
23-8, that's the main takeaway. It's something that this team needed after rough games against Muskingum, a rough Florida trip. 23-8, that's got to feel pretty good. The winning pitcher, Gavin Pratt, he had 4 innings, 5 earned runs, 5 hits, not the greatest outing, 3 walks and strikeouts in that category. Mount and Giraffa came up big with 4 RBIs, but then we see a little bit of movement in Game 2. I know we're going to talk about that left fielder debate in a little bit. Mosley, Hamrick, Hamilton, who do you put out there? Who's in your outfield? Well, Hamrick was the left fielder, and in the first game, 2 hits, 2 RBIs for Hamrick. He's moving to center in the second game. Mosley, who's batting .400 with a .400 on-base percentage this year. I know it's a small sample size, but I guess today is a good telltale sign, this game and the Pitt-Bradford game, of what we're going to see for that left field position. But overall, 23-8, I think they get it done in Game 2 as well. After starting 3-9, 5-9 going into conference play, and into Pitt-Bradford should feel a little better.
Yeah, I feel like it's worth asking another question about the offensive output today.
Right.
10 players at least 1 RBI, 7 players with multiple RBI in that Game 1 win against Pitt Greensburg. How big of a boost is that? You mentioned kind of a slow start on offense for this team moving into, like you mentioned, Allegheny this weekend.
Yeah, right. 10 of those 11 players, obviously, RBIs. They also had hits as well. Mm-hmm. So it's got to feel good, especially when your team is just putting on an offensive barrage. It feels good to be part of that, no matter which way you're a part of that. I know Daniel Flynn, he was a pinch runner. He was the only one without a hit, but he ended up scoring as well. So he crossed the plate as the pinch runner. So if you contribute to any part of your team's success, whether that's in the field, not making errors, which we're also going to get to, and just doing your job at the plate, it feels good overall. So offense got to continue for not only culture, as we mentioned, and confidence as well.
Yeah, and that leads me right into my next question. Do you see this kind of offensive output continuing into the PAC games?
Well, Waynesburg, they average a good amount of runs per game, 5.5, and I know we're going to get into Pitt-Bradford. They're an elite offense, but the pitching, it's still got to be better. 4.86 ERA, still letting up 8 runs. You're not going to put up 23 runs in every game, and also the PAC, like, you can't make these errors, and when you do make the errors, it just diminishes your team's like morale as a whole. And I know you're talking about the offense, but baseball is a game of 3 phases: hitting, fielding, base running. Obviously more pitching, whatever, but like 3 main you can control as a hitter and fielder. You have 3 phases of the game, and one bad play in any of those phases can just diminish your morale and decrease your self-confidence, I guess, which ends up causing slumps and giving guys the yips.
So we're in an interesting situation here with recording because Game 2 is happening right now. The actual episode itself won't come out until tomorrow, which is Tuesday. But if you take a look, this bottom 4 has been so interesting to me, Dean. Game in and game out. Today for Game 2, it's Marcos Mendez, Jordan Mosley, Connor Hamrick, and Noah Gabriel. Just talk about some of those players that are being given more opportunities now and how you see that bottom of the order kind of shaking out as we head into the week here.
Well, Noah Gabriel obviously going to have to step up with Garrett Comer being out for who knows how long. He has an injury that'll be determined, and once we find out, obviously, we'll tell you. But Garrett Comer, him being out, these guys have to step up. Noah Gabriel, he did his part today. He had a double with 2 RBIs. Did strike out twice, but as I said, contributed to the offensive barrage. And Hamrick, obviously, a big day. These small games against teams that you should beat, and when you dominate the teams that you should beat, it feels good as a whole. So if they step up in the games where it should be easy, relatively easy to step up, I think overall, I think they'll be just fine, fitting into those rules, playing as a team, and just being team players overall.
Earlier on, you mentioned the debate between left field, center field, kind of shortstop. Talk a little bit more about that and who you think you should expect to see more time. Well,
as I mentioned, Hamrick played left today. His numbers aren't quite up to par yet, but there's not a big sample size there. Had a good day today, but Jordan Mosley, 5 of 6 of 15 on the year. So it's a 400 batting average, and that's how many times he's gone on base. And he's limited his strikeouts, but also already has 2 errors on the season. But Mosley, I believe, is a good guy to have. He's a great locker room guy, so say. I know it's a dugout guy, I guess, in this case. That's what I was thinking of. I'd like to see Mosley in there just because I know the guys have his confidence. He came up with a big walk-off RBI down in Florida that you were a part of, Anthony, as one of the announcers. Were you on play-by-play that game?
Yeah, I was on play-by-play for that game.
Do you remember the call?
Great.
Was it electric?
It was electric-ish. It was electric enough for the moment, I think. It was a good moment, though.
Single to right, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Guy who could put the ball anywhere it's pitched.
Yeah.
Right field, center, left.
He's also played shortstop this season to that point.
Well,
so
they played him.
They played him in
time,
short,
right?
last game. Last week against Muskingum.
Yeah, that's
he played
right.
one of those 2
Yes,
games.
but
yeah.
that Muskingum game, I don't even know if we should get into that.
No, we're not.
Okay, yeah, 13-1, and then, or no, what was it?
Yeah,
13-1
and
10-3.
Yeah, the only earned run came in that 13-1 game.
That's a team that received top 25,
Also,
top 25 of all D3
top
votes.
10 hitting team in the all across D3, but just overall, Mosley, Hamrick, get them reps. They're going to figure it out in the end, who's battling for what, and we'll see how that shapes out.
Yeah, you alluded to it earlier, the errors. I looked it up earlier, and it's kind of interesting because Waynesburg, as far as PAC opponents are concerned, are in the middle of the pack. Allegheny actually right at the top of that list. But talk about cleaning up those errors moving forward. I know Garrett Comer has 4 on the year. We don't know when we're going to see him next. But just talk a little bit about that, especially moving into conference play.
Yeah, what's interesting, Waynesburg averaged just under 2 errors per game last year, and they only have 22 through 12 games played, right around there.
Right.
They're on pace for less errors in the season, but 6 errors in 1 game, obviously, that's going to make you question. They had 6 errors across the 2 games against Muskingum, so that's not good, especially when you're playing high-quality opponents. That's something that you just have to limit, errors. It's something you can control. And there are things out of your control in the game of baseball, but if it's in your control, you got to make the most of everything. And obviously, you're not going to hit a home run every time or make contact every time. You got to do your part in the field and limit the errors. And when it comes to President's Athletic Conference play, can't have it. So,
aside from the errors, anything else this team needs to tune up before conference play?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about Pitt Bradford.
Yeah, go for it.
Pitt Bradford 7-5. They bat .492 as a team, which is top in the AMCC, the Allegheny Mountain Collegiate Conference. Only 6% strikeout rate, so this team is going to make contact. And Waynesburg pitchers, as I said, just under a 4.9 ERA on the season. It's gonna be a pitch for contact type of game, and it relates directly to the errors. When they make contact, you can't make errors. So I know it sounds simple, but it hasn't been as simple, especially in that Muskingum game. But I think this team could get going, especially with this little confidence boost after Pitt Greensburg going into the other branch, Pitt Bradford. And we'll see how it shapes out. 23-8. I guess you'll get the score update when this episode's released because it's about 4 o'clock now. Game just started. And you'll see this today or tomorrow, yesterday. I don't know, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
But,
also of note, Aiden Adamson is making his first
Yes.
collegiate start on the mound in game number 2. Yesterday, I have to make sure I say
Right.
that correctly. Yesterday against Pitt Greensburg. Waynesburg will take on Pitt Bradford this upcoming Thursday before taking on the Allegheny Gators on Saturday to open up conference play. We thank Dean Shazer for coming on to talk about baseball. Next up is Seth Adams to talk about a softball team that's had a couple weeks off. Back on our final segment of Jacket Sports Weekly this week. Anthony DeFilippo still with you alongside Brett Gambita. Seth Adams, our softball host. Seth, welcome back onto the show.
Thanks, Flip. It's been a very uneventful week, you could say, in the softball realm. I mean, before we were on 11 days?
An 11-day break between games. Talk about how that might affect the team, affect maybe some of that momentum, I'm going to say, that they had in Florida going forward. Back-to-back games against Carlo and tomorrow against a Penn State branch campus.
Yeah, so they're 10-1 currently as we sit, and they play today against Carlo. This team, I feel, is at a point where they're so good that it really doesn't matter how many days off that they have. I mean, the whole Florida trip kind of shown that. I mean, they dominated while they were there, outscoring their opponent 70-23. I don't really think the days off are really going to matter. They're going against Carlo, who last time they played Carlo, they beat them 10-4 and 2-1. So it was a good competitive game, but Carlo, as I said, are 1-7 coming into today. So I don't really think it's going to be too big of an issue. But, obviously you don't take every game lightly. You go in, you give everything you have, especially at the collegiate level. You never know what can happen. But I don't really think this 11 days are really going to do anything. It's a good break. I mean, you go on this trip, you have a however long bus ride. I'm sure that wasn't great sleeping on a bus for however long. Flip, how was that?
I can attest to that. It was bad.
Probably not good. So I'm sure that now they're well rested, prepared, and they're ready for this week.
Now, for all the tubers out there that might have missed last week's episode, do you want to give them all a kind of a condensed rundown of the softball trip?
Yeah, for sure, Brett. Like I said, they're 10-1 now, so they were 8-1 over the trip. They played a doubleheader before that, and they swept them. So they were 8-1 over the trip, and for this trip, they lost the first game 9-0 against Spartansburg Methodist. Not their greatest game, probably the worst out of the 9, obviously, as they lost that one in 6 innings. So whatever, but then they bounced back against Wilkes. They won that game 3-2, and then they played North Carolina Wesleyan. They won that game 10-7. Then Valley Forge, they won that one 14-1 in 5 innings. Bay Path, 18-1 in 5 innings. Grove City, PAC school, they won that game 3-2. St. Elizabeth, they won that one 7-0. Brooklyn, 9-1 in 5 innings. And finally, Lancaster Bible, 6-1. They won that one. So just a pure dominance, like I said. A couple of those games scoring double-digit runs and completely blowing teams out of the water.
So we mentioned the 11-day break over and over again. I'm going to flash back to the present day here. Talk about how the team now playing back-to-back days against Carlo, Penn State, Greater Allegheny, how they're going to approach those 2 days considering that there could be some fatigue moving forward into this weekend against UJ.
So like I said earlier, they're playing Carlo. They're 1-7. This is another non-conference game, a game where they can really figure out who they are. Kind of just experiment with some people. Put some people in different positions that they might not be comfortable with. See what they can do. Carlo, they had a tough trip. They lost some games 7-5, 6-5, 4-0, 8-4. So they were close. They battled. Carlo, don't take them lightly. They're there to compete. And last year, they had a close game 2-1. And the game they won against Carlo last year 10-4, they were down 3-0 after the first. So Carlo can compete. However, Penn State Greater Allegheny, a mouthful right there. They play tomorrow. They're not the greatest, I'm not going to lie to you. They haven't won a game in a couple of years. They went 0-18 last year, had a couple of blowout games against some opponents last year. So I kind of take this game, no offense, Penn State Greater Allegheny. I take that game as kind of like a JV game. Kind of put anybody you want to get some reps in and see what they can do and get some. Maybe some of the girls don't get as much time. Give them some time. This is a game for them to really show what they have.
Now, who are some key players that you're expecting to play a role in the Carlo series?
In the Carlo series, I mentioned her a little bit last week, but Mesa Heitman, she's a freshman. She's playing shortstop all break. She has been outstanding as having tied for the best batting average with a 5.29 coming into today, 9.41 slugging. She has struggled in the field, though. This is one thing that you need to work on, Mesa, and I'm just saying this, I'm sitting on a desk, but trust me. A little bit of struggling in the field a little bit, having 7 errors so far, 70%. As long as she fixes that up, gets a little more cleaner in the field, completes some more plays, I think she's going to be one of the future stars at this Waynesburg program for the next couple of years. She's a freshman. She's got room to grow. I think that she is going to be the star in a couple of years. You can call me out on that too. I think she's going to be great. As long as she figures out that stuff in the field, gets better. I mean, it's in the collegiate level. The ball's coming off the bat a lot faster than the high school level. So once she figures that out, picks it up, I think she's going to be great.
When she has a bat like that, I guess you can kind of overlook some of that field stuff.
I mean, 5.29 batting average with 34 at-bats is kind of impressive.
So you peer ahead in the schedule and you see Washington and Jefferson just sitting there on Friday. What are you expecting to see when conference play opens up? And What a tough first game of the schedule to have, right?
Tough first game. Dub J sitting right now. They're 5-6, so they had an okay trip when they went. And in the last 6 games against Waynesburg, they've split. They've gone 3-3. So these teams are pretty evenly matched. They're pretty evenly based and always sit at that top of the conference. But they're going to have to look out for Taylor Dunn. She is their ace. She has 40 innings pitched so far and a 1.89 ERA. And she's 3-2. So she's going to face them no matter what. So be ready for her. Prepare and get ready for these games coming up to prepare for a pitcher like that. But then Hannah Allen, she is their lead batter. She has a 4.76 average, and 5 others have above 300. So you're going against another squad like Waynesburg. I'd say they're pretty even. Waynesburg has a couple above 400 and some others above 300 as well. But Dub J, they're right there with them, and their record may not show it, but they are just as competitive. So they got to be able to prepare and get ready for this conference play. Like you said, this is a tough opponent to go against for your first one. Mm-hmm. It's a challenge. I take it as the biggest challenge. You're going against this team. Show what you got. Set the tone for the season, especially in PAC play.
Yeah, an interesting note. Carlo actually went against W&J in their Florida trip. So do you think this Carlo matchup for Waynesburg can kind of tell the tale for what's to come for Waynesburg W&J?
I think so. I think Carlo isn't what their record shows. I think that Carlo is a pretty solid team, even though they're 1-7. Like I said, they had some really close games over break, losing. I think the one they lost to Dub J was the 4-0 loss. I have it on here. 8-4 loss, 6-5 loss. This team competes. They're not bad, so they got to be ready for that. So Dub J, I feel their record doesn't show who they are either. They've had a couple close games over break. They're 5-6. They're above 500. Waynesburg looks really good on paper, but these teams are very evenly matched. When you're down in the trips, you play anybody down there. You could play some of the top-ranked teams. You could play some of the worst teams in the nation. So I feel like it's kind of a toss-up until we see what happens this week, and then we can compare for Saturday.
I hate
Friday,
to make you say their name again, but I'm going to ask about Penn State Greater Allegheny again.
Okay.
And you talked about making it kind of a junior varsity game. I know Penn State Greater Allegheny has a smaller roster as well. Mm-hmm. Who are some girls you can expect to see from Waynesburg in that matchup? Some of those players that maybe haven't gotten as much of a shot so far.
Tori Faust, she has batting 400. She has 10 at-bats. She's doing pretty well. I'd say put her in a starting position. Mm-hmm. Alyssa Rager, she's kind of she's in the catching rotation, so I'll probably see her a lot more. But I want to see some of the pitching. Madison Baker, she got some time in the first game they played against Spartansburg, and she got some time on the mound, but not a lot. So I want to see her in there. Presley Meadows in there as well. They have Baker only has 3 innings pitched. Meadows has 8. I kind of mentioned it last week. I want to see these girls kind of get into a rhythm of if Autumn Stemple or Sydney Wilson are doing too hot, you got to have someone to be able to go in there for the next, because those are your 2, right? When you're playing doubleheaders, those are your 2 for the PAC. But if someone's not doing hot, you got to find someone who's going to replace them. And those 2 I feel I want to see in both of those games. I want to see both of them start in that one. Why not? See what they can do and see what happens.
Well, Seth, that's all we have. Thank you for taking the time to join us to talk about softball.
Absolutely.
And that will conclude today's episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. So thank you for tuning in. See you next week, and fill out those brackets.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community